Okay, now I'm going to install my rear XTR brakes. Let's first go over the parts that come with the XTR brakes again. It comes pre-assembled with the lever and the caliper already attached, and it comes with 2 bolts to hold your caliper down to your frame. Then it comes with one of these little stems that's going to go inside the hose after we cut it, because the one that's installed in there we won't be able to use again. So after we cut the hose, we're going to have to install one of these inside the hose, and then an olive will go over top of that. This little wire also comes in the set, and what this is for is after we install our brakes, as a safety precaution to keep the brakes bolts from loosening, the wire actually goes through this nut, and then you wrap it around to keep it from backing out. So that's the parts that come with our XTR brakes. Now I'm going to temporarily install it on the frame and measure the hose, and then we're going to cut the hose and reinstall the hose back on our brake lever. Okay, to make it easier to measure our cable that we're gonna, or hose that we're gonna cut, I'm going to detach the hose from the lever so that when we put the caliper and the hose on the bike, we can measure precisely how much hose we're going to have to cut off. So first thing we have to do is pull back this little rubber grommet. That exposes our little nut here. We're going to take an 8mm wrench here and loosen that. It's a little snug. We're just going to pull that off of there. Pull the hose out. Takes a little bit of a pull to get it out there. Okay, so now our lever's detached from our hose. So now we can go ahead and put the caliper and the hose on the bike and measure our hose that we're going to cut. Okay, now I have the caliper attached to the bike very loosely, just kind of so I can get a good measurement for the hose. Then I have the hose running along on this particular frame where it's supposed to come along under the chainstay. I've just temporarily attached it with some zip ties here. I've left enough space under the bottom bracket so that when the suspension activates, it has enough room for the hose there. On this frame, there's also a little clamp onto the bottom bracket here that holds the brake hose cable. It's the same thing that where my Di2 wire is going to come out of the bottom bracket. It's all held together with that one screw, and that clamps down the hose. Then it has some more of these little standouts here to attach more zip ties, and I'm just kind of approximating so I can put all the zip ties on. So then the hose comes up here, and I left enough space that, as you can see, that it if the handlebar's turned 180 degrees, and you can see where I have my little marker, I have a paper clip wrapped around the hose to kind of get an idea. I could slide that back and forth and see approximately where I wanted to cut the hose. And with the handlebars cranked around 180 degrees, that gives me a pretty good idea of where I can have the hose and still be able to handlebars all the way around. I tested it both ways. I swung the handlebars back and forth. If you leave it too long, it leaves too much cable when it turns the other way, and it binds up and could get caught on stuff. So that's approximately where I'm going to cut my hose. Okay, now I've got my hose here, and this is where I'm going to cut it right here. So I'm just going to use a very nice, sharp X-Acto blade and cut down through the hose nice and evenly, making sure I'm at 90 degrees to the, let me just do this, zoom in a little bit here. Make sure I cut nice and 90-degree angle to the hose. Okay, it's cut. So I make sure I got a nice clean cut at 90 degrees, and I'll just look at that real quickly and clean it up. Okay, now that I have my hose cut, we're going to need these pieces, which actually only come with the package from the freight brunt rotor, which is the little hose clamping devices. Basically gives you the ability to clamp your hose in a vise, so you can insert this little connector insert in there. But first we're going to put on this hose. The other thing that comes with the front brake rotors that doesn't come with the rear, I'm sorry, rotors, I meant calipers, is the brake bleeding pad. So you need this to grab this from the front kit if you're doing the rears first. So the first thing we're going to do is we are going to put the rubber collet that comes with the, when we cut this off, this goes on first. Then we're going to put on our brake nut, 8mm nut. Then we're going to put on our olive. This is the new olive that comes in the package. And then now we're going to hammer our connector insert into the top of that. So what we need to do first is to put this up here. I'm going to assemble this little holder, and I have a little mini vise here that I'm going to do this with. I'm just going to clamp that in there, get that nice and snug, just like that. So that just gives us a nice firm base to be able to, we're actually going to have to hammer that little piece in there. So I'll try and get in a little closer here as we're getting ready to do this. And as you can see, I'll show you from the side too so you can see what we're doing here. We're going to hammer this little pin into that hole. Okay. So let's go ahead and line it up. Make sure we have everything we need on the hose already. Line that into the hole. Just take a small hammer. It doesn't have to be a big hammer. Just a small hammer. Oops, sorry. Just a small hammer. We're going to tap that in there. As you can see from the side, it's starting to make its way in there. I'm going to tap, 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 tap. One thing I learned is to make sure you get all the oil off the hose before you start hammering this in. Otherwise, it slips inside this little block right here. Okay, just going to do that slowly. Break that down a little bit more. And you can see now that the little connector insert is firmly all the way in against the hose with no gaps whatsoever. Okay, so now I got my olive and my connector insert inserted into the hose. Okay, now we got our hose cut. We have our connector insert on there. We have our olive on there. We have our 8mm nut. Then we have our rubber boot all attached to the hose. And now we're going to reconnect this to the lever. So what we do is push that all the way inside. You slide the olive all the way inside of that. The bolt pushes in and starts to push the olive forward. And right now I'm just going to put this in provisionally snug with an 8mm wrench, because when I put it on the bike, I want to take out any twists in the hose. So I might need to loosen that and reconnect it so I don't have any twists in the hose. And then of course the boot's going to go right on over top of that. So now we have our hose cut and we have the correct length. Now we're going to reattach it to the bike. Okay, so now I have the caliper firmly attached onto the bike. I'll loosen these bolts when I get my wheel attached with my rotor on there to get the alignment on my rotor perfectly, but for right now I got them torqued down. I couldn't find a torque specification for that, so I just did it to 10 Newton meters. Got my hose running around down along below the bottom bracket. I'm up inside the frame with a couple of just twist ties, zip ties along the way. And now I'm going to final tighten the nut that holds my hose to my brake lever. So let's flip it into another position so we can take a look at that. Okay, now that we have our brake lever in place and we have our hose attached to the frame, and now I don't have to worry about twists in the hose, now I can final tighten my nut here. Make sure again that the hose is firmly in place all the way in before we tighten this down. I'm just going to wrench this down until it is nice and snug, and this goes to 5 to 7 Newton meters. So I don't have my torque wrench with me right now, but that goes to 5 to 7 Newton meters, and then you just put your little rubber boot back on like that. After you have that in place, then you can use your 4mm hex to firmly attach your lever there, and then this gets torqued down to 4 to 6 Newton meters. Okay, onto your bar, and then you're ready to go. All we got to do now is bleed the system.